Yes, you are now listening to the sounds of 2-5 Daily. So, week 4 is in the books, ladies and gentlemen. College football had showdown Saturday, and it delivered. We had Ohio State and Notre Dame go to the very last play of the game. We had Florida State and Clemson go to overtime. Well, Colorado didn't necessarily show up, but we had UCLA and Utah, even though it was an ugly game, it went down to the last possession. So we had a lot going on yesterday, and it was a great day of football. I'm happy, going into week 5 next week. So let's go ahead and let's recap this weekend that was. So I mentioned Ohio State and Notre Dame. If Ryan Day wants to know where Lou Holtz is right now, Lou Holtz called his team soft and said that they weren't physical enough to go into South Bend and win. But you know what? A lot of people have been saying that for a year, but not necessarily about South Bend, about Ann Arbor, because Michigan has been beating on Ohio State the last couple of years, and Ryan Day somehow was on the hot seat, even though after last night's win, he's 49-6 overall. But if he doesn't beat Michigan this year, people in Columbus are going to go crazy, because you remember I told you before, people in Columbus don't have a life. Now, even with that being said, they were a missed field goal away from the national title last year. Like, I have no doubts that they would have beat TCU, which Michigan wasn't able to do. But that's a whole nother conversation. Kyle McCord grew up last night. 21 of 37 for 240. He did not throw a touchdown pass, but he made some timely throws that made you forget that he was a first-time starter, your first-year starter, I should say. He outplayed Sam Hartman 17 of 25. 175, even though he threw a touchdown pass. He made some critical mistakes. He had some bad throws late in that game that were almost picked off, but they weren't, and Ohio State still had to drive the field, but they were able to do that. Notre Dame was able to run the ball. Both teams ran the ball. 176 for Notre Dame, 126 for Ohio State. It was a tough game. 17-14 is your final. I couldn't help but think to myself, it would be so Ryan Day for all the talk that we've talked about him. It would be so Ryan Day for them to score that touchdown with 1 second left. Gutsy call running the ball. Seattle Seahawks take note. But they ran the ball 16-14. Got to kick the extra point. The refs put 1 second back on the clock. And I said, wouldn't it be crazy if Notre Dame blocked that kick and ran it back and we have overtime? That's just the way the day was going yesterday. It didn't work out that way. But, Notre Dame, it was just like last year. I brought this up. Last year was 21-10 in the I was about to say the big house. I'm so sorry, y'all. Up in Ohio Stadium, 21-10, CJ Stroud, was there, and the defenses were playing lights out, and Ohio State came on late. Well, this time, Notre Dame took the lead with about 8 minutes left, 8:10, I believe, to be exact. Sam Hartman with a touchdown pass. And then from that point on, Ohio State played with fire. They went for the dumb fourth down on the next possession. Not that going for it was dumb, but the play they called was they just tried to get too cute, just like Clemson did, which we'll get to in a minute. But, sweeping across the formation, pitch. It was 4th-and-1. Just line up and push somebody forward, unless you're soft like Lou Holtz said you are. But it worked out for them in the end. Notre Dame got the ball back. Both teams going back and forth. The defense is just bowed up. We talked about Jim Knowles being in year 2. His defense showed up. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like every time I watch Ohio State in a big game, Marvin Harrison gets injured or has some kind of health issue going on. He got his ankle rolled up on. He came back last night, but still wasn't himself. So Ibuka came through big time. Julian Fleming had some big catches on that final drive. But it was Ohio State 17, Notre Dame 14. Notre Dame, keep your head up. You're not out of this. You came into the game number 9. I saw they fell behind Bama. So I believe they're 13 in the AP poll now. But the season is still in front of you. You still got Clemson. You still got USC. And oh, by the way, college game day in Durham, North Carolina next week against the Duke Blue Devils. How about it? And of course, Duke killed UConn yesterday. No need to really get into that. But, down in Clemson, South Carolina, the Seminoles came through. They came marching in. And Clemson had a hell of a game plan. Now, since I've been a little kid and watching Florida State, I watched Florida State for the first time back when I was 7. And I feel like since that time, the best way to exploit Florida State's defense is to throw it to your running back out the backfield, throw it to the tight end. Jeremy Shockey, Brevin Knight, or Brevin Jordan, and then I remember 2002 against the great, great, great Miami team that ended up losing to Ohio State. Willis McGahee on the screen pass in the fourth quarter. Like, this is what Florida State does. This is how you affect their defense. So Dabo Swinney came out, was aggressive in the first half. He took everything Florida State threw at him, and he had an answer. Cade Klubnik looked comfortable in the pocket, a long way from how he looked against Duke on opening night, Labor Day. But then in the second half, they just decided to get conservative. They were up, by 7 on their way for the kill shot, 24-17. And what do you know? Kalen DeLoach came through, got through, popped Cade Klubnik. Ball comes loose. He picks it up 56 yards later. We got a tied game. Excuse me. So then Clemson they both go back and forth. Both teams started to play defense and tighten up. And then Clemson got some big runs from Will Shipley. Got into field goal range, 29-yarder. Here's this kicker. All game, the announcer was talking about how he had retired. He was coming back. This was the big moment for him in a big game against Florida State. Season on the line, basically. You miss this kick, and your playoff chances are probably over, or at the very least, you go to overtime, and your playoff chances could be over. You could go 0-2 in the ACC, which you don't want to do. That takes us back to 2010. Billy Napier is the offensive coordinator, getting fired. Dabo saved his job. So what's going to happen? So, he misses the kick, wide left. And as a Florida State fan, even though they were playing against my team, I have to admit, when I see these kickers go wide, it does something to me. It takes me back to 91, 92. It takes me back to the Orange Bowl against Miami, getting a kick blocked. It takes me to wide left. And that same game where Willis McGahee caught the screen pass and took it to the house. It was just one of those things where I was like, man, he missed it. Great job. Wide left. I'm screaming. And then I go, oh, man, I hope he's okay. Because, as a Florida State fan, that stuff just lingers. And it just stays in the back of your mind. And when you get back into these big moments, it just happens again. So anyway, I digress. Get to overtime. Florida State comes out. Jordan Travis hits Keon Coleman. Who else? Deep on the 25-yard touchdown. Catch of the year in my mind. Now Clemson gets the ball. They have a chance to tie it up. Maybe if they get the touchdown, they're going to go for 2 and try to walk off with it. So what happens? Shipley, 9-yard run, sets up 3rd and 1. Okay. Now I'm nervous. 3rd and 1, right? So RPO, Cade Klubnik, has the ability at the line to decide what he's going to do. And then what he decided to do was throw a screen to the flat, to the receiver. Why? Like, I guess he was supposed to catch Florida State sleeping right there. You sneak a touchdown right there, but you only needed 1 yard, young man. You could have quarterback sneaked it. You could have handed it off. You could have did a play action and throw it across the middle to the tight end. That was working all game, whatever it may be. He chose to throw it to the flat. So I said, okay, it's 4th and 1. Maybe they'll throw, some kind of play where they fake the handoff, get the back, right at the line of scrimmage, turn up field. No, I guess it was supposed to be a slant, but he overthrew it. So 31-24, Florida State gets out of there. Now, what does Florida State's season look like? Syracuse is undefeated, but I don't want to be that guy. I don't think most Florida State fans are worried about Syracuse. So I think most Florida State fans have reduced this to a 2-game season. Duke and Florida. Those are the 2 games left that I think most Noles are concerned about. Clemson, on the other hand, 0-2 in the ACC. Still got UNC, still got Miami, and then out of conference, still got the Gamecocks, still got Notre Dame. I'm not saying that we're looking at 7-5, 6-6. I'm just saying it's on the table. It's on the table. I still think they win 8 games at the very least, maybe 9. So, they showed yesterday that they still have the talent. Sometimes it just comes down to coaching. Utah and UCLA. Utah, physical. Is Cam Rising going to play? Is he not going to play? Whittingham tells us nothing, ever. But he didn't play. Nate Johnson came in, 9 for 17. Putrid performance as usual, but first play of the game. Dante Moore, my God, the freshman from UCLA, throws a pick 6. That ended up being the difference in the game. Final score 14-7. And UCLA had a chance with about a minute 40-ish left. And then they got sacked on back-to-back plays, which just told the story of the day because Dante Moore got sacked 7 times against the Utes. Not only did he get sacked 7 times, but UCLA was supposed to be a physical team. The talk is Utah is super physical. This is how they beat you. They wear you down. But the talk going into this game is that UCLA was just as physical as Utah, if not more so. And even though the Utes won the Pac-12 last year, they lost to UCLA during last season. So UCLA, they finished the game with 32 carries as a team and 9 yards. So, the winning streak is still alive. 17 straight games at Rice Eccles for the Utah Utes. Utah uglied it up, ran the ball 48 times. Now we got to see if Cam Rising is coming back because this ain't going to work on Friday night. I'm starting to tell you. They're going up to Corvallis. And I don't know if you remember, like I remember last season on a Friday night, Trojangelis went up there, Caleb Williams, Mr. Heisman, and they got out of there with a 17-14 win when Oregon State had control of that game for at least 3 quarters of it. So Utah better have Cam Rising Friday or Oregon State's going to knock them off. Speaking of Oregon State, lost the Pac-2, the Tupac championship game to Wazoo yesterday. Props to Wazoo, props to Cam Ward. Put that man in your Heisman conversation. They were in up 35-14. Oregon State came back respectable, lost by 3. So they got the Utes coming in on Friday. Here we go. Washington State, are they a Pac-12 contender for this year? We're going to have to see. But who is not and probably won't be a Pac-12 contender for this year? The Colorado Buffaloes. Woo-wee. That game was over before they got off the bus. I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen. So I sat up here all week long debating back and forth if Colorado could cover or not. And I did not think that there was any chance that they were going to win. So I was on board with Oregon winning. I did not think it was going to look like that. I thought at the very least Colorado would be able to get 20 points. And oh, by the way, high noon next week, they got Trojangelis coming into Boulder. So here we go. The season begins now. Now, with that being said, as I was looking at this game, Dan Lanning, Cinderella story is over. We're playing for wins and they're playing for clicks. Okay. I like it. I like the energy, right? Now, the energy I don't like is Kerry Steele, media member, by the way, saying that Oregon was taking a stand for us. Who is this us that she's speaking of? What stand is Oregon taking? Now, you heard me last week on Sports Reports' Order say that I don't think that everybody that criticizes Coach Prime is racist, is a bigot, is hate, like any of that stuff. Like, you can do both. You cannot be on board with Dion without being the illest dregs of our society. But when you make statements like that, it makes me wonder where you're going with that and who you're talking to. Now, back to the game. 35-0 at halftime. Bo Nix came out looking like a Heisman candidate. But then, of course, the tail of the game. Dion punted on 4th down. Oregon got the ball, got stopped 3 and out. So we thought, faked the punt from inside their own 15. So Oregon was coming out for blood regardless, and I don't think Colorado was prepared to match their intensity. Now, Colorado, we talked about it. Their offensive line, their defensive line, their lines, they need to build these up. They have the talent on the outside, Jimmy Horn Jr. They have the running back, Dylan Edwards. They have the quarterback, Shedeur Sanders. So their ones and their stars, their best players, can match up with Oregon's best players, can match up with Trojan Angeles' best players. But then after that, it's a crapshoot and it ain't happening, So Colorado is a talented team. We knew that this day was going to come. Like I said, I didn't think it was going to be 42-6, but we knew that a day was going to come where Colorado either got humbled or they got beat. Now, this is the problem. A lot of people were out there after they beat TCU saying, oh, could they win the Pac-12? And then they beat Nebraska, and people said Shadeur's the Heisman. And then they beat Colorado State, even though Colorado State took them to overtime and put up 2,000 yards on them in that game. Everybody said, oh, Colorado is here. Now that Oregon wins, these same people are running and hiding. Oh, everybody's a hater. Why do you want to see Coach Prime fail? They're responding to you and not him. This is that LeBron James mania. We don't hate him. Sometimes we just don't like y'all. So me trying to be the objective guy that I am, because I love Coach Prime. I love him as a player. I love him right now. He's inspiring. What he did at Jackson State can't be commended enough, especially with all the adversity that he had going on down there. Now he's in Boulder, started off 3-0 with a team that finished 1-11 last year, brought in 60 to 70 new players this year, trying to figure it all out, started 3-0. I can't do anything but give him credit, but I also got to keep it real and just say Oregon was the better team. And oh, by the way, USC might just do the same thing this weekend. Now, USC's got a bad defense, as seen last night, 42-28 over Arizona State, with Arizona State's backups on the offensive line still able to push USC around. So if Colorado doesn't score 20 on USC, then we need to have a different kind of conversation. You know what I mean? So Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, I told you, running his damn mouth all week long, talking about we know who's calling the plays. We know what to expect. I'm not preparing for this. I'm preparing for that, because Alabama showed us this against South Florida. Problem is, Alabama could have showed you whatever they wanted. They weren't going to play Ty Simpson, and they weren't going to play Buckner, right? So starting all over, Jalen Milroe, he's got the arm, he's got the legs. It just doesn't always work out sometimes. Sometimes the intermediate throws are where he fails. So where Ole Miss stayed in this game, because they had a 7-6 lead at halftime, but where they stayed in the game was the red zone. Alabama went 1 for 5 in the red zone, including a pick, because when you get down to the red zone, you could play zone against Milroe and have somebody spy him, and he just can't function, or he makes a mistake as attributed by the interception. So Ole Miss was outscored 18-3 in the second half. They were outrushed 148-56. I told you about Quinshon Judkins, and something's just not right. He only got 13 rushes. Jackson Dart ran the ball 12 times. Something's going on at Ole Miss that just ain't right. And oh, by the way, Ole Miss, you got LSU next week. LSU struggling with Arkansas down in the Bayou, 34-31. Saturday night game, LSU. LSU was a 17-point favorite or so, and everybody probably put money down on LSU. But LSU's got a major, major, major problem that Florida State exposed. That secondary, 2 different broken plays where KJ Jefferson escaped the pocket, and the LSU DB got caught looking in the backfield, and old Luke Hines ran behind everybody. 6 catches, 116 yards, 2 touchdowns. But LSU was able to survive because Jalen Daniels had another amazing performance, as did Malik Neighbors. So Malik Neighbors had 8 catches, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels, 20 of 29 for 320, 4 touchdowns and an interception. KJ Jefferson gave away 2 interceptions. He had 3 touchdown passes, 289 yards. I'm concerned about LSU's secondary. Ole Miss just isn't the team to expose it. So there you go. So we'll see the Battle of Magnolia next Saturday down on the Grove in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. I am here for it. Back to Colorado for a second. Forgot to mention the 7 sacks. So Shadur's been taking hits all year. So I'm just going to hope and pray that he's able to play this whole season, because a couple of these games like this, it's not going to look so great. And the total yards from that Colorado game, by the way, Oregon 522, Colorado 199. That tells you the story right there. So, of course, college football is continuing. We're going into week 5 next week. But before I get out of here, I got to hit you with my news and notes and my 2-5 takeaways and things that I, keeping track of. Kansas 4-0 back to back for the first time since 1915, and they're ranked. They are number 24 after a 38-27 win over BYU. It was a good game, back and forth, up and down the field, and KU just pulled away late. Jalen Daniels looks good, just like he did last year before the injury. Kansas at Texas this weekend. Keep your eye on it. I'm not picking the upset just yet, but just keep your eye on it. Kentucky 4-0 in 3 consecutive seasons for the first time since 1911. They beat up on Vanderbilt yesterday, gave up a lot more points than I would have liked to have seen if I'm a Kentucky fan. But the Commonwealth will be a rocking come noon this weekend coming up, because the Gators are coming through. Now, who's going to be second to Georgia? Maybe if Kentucky wins this game, they can give Georgia some pushback. But for the time being, I have no idea who either one of these teams are. I know Florida beat Tennessee, but I don't think Tennessee is what people thought they were coming into the season. So not to take away from Florida, I just don't know how impressive it is given the data that we have about Tennessee now. Kentucky, on the other hand, they haven't looked good. They looked good yesterday, putting up 45 points, but the defense gave up 28 to Vanderbilt. They didn't look good against the MAC competition earlier this season. So I'm interested for this game in the Commonwealth Saturday. We'll see what happens. Florida at Kentucky. Shout out to the Northwestern Wildcats. We know that they had a tumultuous offseason, with that culminated with Pat Fitzgerald getting fired. Their over-under was set at 3 wins. They were a 1-point underdog to UTEP in Chicago, but they pulled it out 38-7. They won that game. And then last night, they were down 21 in the fourth quarter to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and they came back and they won. Now, it makes me wonder. I heard some names for the Michigan State job, and one of those names was PJ Fleck. Story? Non-story? I guess we'll find out. And I got some coaching lists coming for you later from Michigan State. Neil Brown, probably not going anywhere anytime soon. I told you last week he's saving his job 1 week at a time, and he did it again. Beat everybody's sweetheart, Texas Tech, 20-13. West Virginia is now 3-1. They got their Big 12 win. Texas Tech, who was a sleeper that everybody, well, not everybody, you know how we do nowadays, everybody, but there were a lot of publications and sports media personnel who said that Texas Tech was going to be their sleeper pick to win the Big 12, or at least get to the Big 12 championship game. Now they're 1-3. They lost to Oregon at home. They lost to West Virginia yesterday. And of course, there was opening week at Laramie, at War Memorial Stadium in Wyoming. So Texas Tech 1-3, probably not getting to the Big 12 championship game. Props to Matt Campbell responding. The loss to Ohio last week, coming out and beating on Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State made it respectable in the end, 34-27. But Iowa State controlled that game from start to finish. And I brought up last week, and I'm going to bring it up again, is Mike Gundy coming up on the end of his time in Oklahoma and Stillwater. So, I don't know. I would like to think no, because he's been so successful there. He's the face of the program. You would like to think. But is it time for a new voice? But we got a new Big 12, so we're going to see. UCF, hashtag UC Facts, went into Manhattan, Kansas, and put up a valiant fight It just wasn't good enough. So Kansas State's back on the winning track after the loss to Missouri last week. Dave Aranda. Now, anybody who knows 2-5 knows that I respect and I love Dave Aranda. But even I got to call out the shenanigans. Now, I know Blake Shapen is hurt. But I take you back to 2021. Baylor went 12-2. Had the epic Big 12 title game against Oklahoma State. Ever since then, 21-19. The way they blew the game to Utah last week. They had it in control, gave it away in the last minute, and then they got beat 38-6 by the Longhorns. Now, no shame in losing to the Longhorns. That team did go into Tuscaloosa, remember, and win just a couple of weeks ago. But to lose like that on your home field to the big bad bully of the state that your school hates and that your fans get off on beating, it's not a good sign, my man. 21-19 since that Big 12 title. Could Dave Aranda be on his way out of Waco? I hope he gets another year. I don't know. Another loss like this, and he might not make it through that weekend. So that's that. Now, back to the ACC for a second. I talked about Clemson. 0-2 in the ACC. What does it all mean? This is what it means. So you got Florida State over here right now, undefeated in conference, the favorite to win the conference now. Then over here, you got a scuttlebutt. You got the Hurricanes, undefeated overall so far, haven't lost in the ACC yet, who have never won the ACC. You got the Wolfpack, who I can tell you that as a Florida State fan, I don't want to see them in the ACC championship game just based off of recent history. But you got NC State, who has not won the ACC since 1979. You got UNC, Drake May. They haven't won the ACC since 1980, and they're undefeated. They went into, is it still Heinz Field? I'm going to just call it Heinz Field. They went into Pitt last night and put the beat down on the Panthers. Keep your eye on Pat Narduzzi in Michigan State as well. More to come. But with that being said, you got Louisville, who was my pick before the season to be potentially this year's TCU. There isn't that many TCU candidates out there, but Louisville plays the ACC regular season with no Florida State, with no Clemson. But guess what? Friday night, they go to Raleigh. So that game is going to go a long way because both of those two teams play Miami. So we're going to see who's going to beat Florida State. I'm saying it right now. Who's going to beat Florida State in the ACC championship game? It's wide open. And don't forget Duke. I told you they got college game day for the first time ever this Saturday against Notre Dame. They're undefeated. They're undefeated in conference. The Notre Dame game obviously is not a conference game. Duke has not won the ACC since 1989. So we might see a piece of history this season if things continue on the path that they're on. Props to Georgia Tech for going into Wake and getting a win, by the way. So Georgia feasted on their cupcakes again. Yesterday it was Trent Dilfer and his Alabama at Birmingham Blazers. Not a test at all. But this weekend, Georgia plays their first road game of the season. Carson Beck is taking the show down to Jordan-Hare Stadium down in Auburn, which I like to refer to as West Georgia. So we're going to see. Now, Auburn is not a good team. Peyton Thorne is not a good quarterback. But beware of Hugh Freeze. Because if like I know, Hugh Freeze beat Alabama back-to-back years when he was at Ole Miss, 2014 and 15. Last time Ole Miss beat Alabama, by the way. So I'm just saying, it's the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Just throwing it out there. Maybe I was wrong about Cincinnati. I came into the season and said Cincinnati was going to go 4-8. Hiring Satterfield was a mistake from Louisville. And then they went to Pitt, beat Pitt in the first ACC game on the CW. Then they came back, lost to Miami of Ohio last week. And I'd be damned if they didn't hold Oklahoma to 20 points yesterday. And I just don't know if that says more about Oklahoma or if it says more about Cincinnati. To be continued. But if I'm Oklahoma, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm a little nervous because you got the Red River shootout coming up in a few weeks. And I know you're supposed to say Red River rivalry nowadays. It's the Red River shootout. Anyway, so BC, Boston College, played Florida State last week. The bandana game. I told you the bandana game is always tough, no matter who you are. It's just tough because they play their best game of the season, and rightfully so, because it's for a great reason. And then they gave up 56 to Louisville yesterday. Got doubled up by Louisville. So Brian Brom got that offense clicking down there. Woo! Where do I begin? Iowa got shut out up in Happy Valley during the whiteout last night. But that's not even the crazy part about it. The crazy part about it is this is the weirdest stat I've ever heard. Just from the standpoint of, we keep track of time of possession. You hear people talk about yards per play, yards per carry, those type of numbers. How wild is this? Penn State ran 97 plays. Iowa ran 33. 33 plays for a total game. I'm sure Oregon ran 33 or more plays in quarters yesterday. Now, where does that leave Brian Ferentz? He's at 84 points still. Got to get the 325, 8 games left in the regular season. Got to get 30.1 to get there. If you count the bowl game, shall they make a bowl game? It drops down to about 23. So, can I trust them to score 23 points a game? Where you at, Cade McNamara? Like I said, Wazoo, the big win. Keep Wazoo on your radar. Talked about LSU secondary, New Year's 6 watch. And of course, for those uninitiated, the New Year's 6 watch is the G5 teams that are leading the race to play in a New Year's Bowl. Now, who's the leader right now? Last week, I told you to keep your eye on Liberty and Air Force. They both won yesterday. Wouldn't that be something if one of those two teams got there? Air Force, just because of all the military restrictions and everything, but they would have to win the Mountain West. Liberty in their first year, CUSA, they got the money. Last week I said ODU and JMU could replace Virginia and Virginia Tech. Maybe it's Liberty because ODU had a 10-9 win over Texas A&M Commerce of FCS. But anyway, back to the New Year's 6. Guess who's in the top 25 right now? It just happens to be a team with 2 Power 5 wins, one at Tempe and one in Ross-Ade Stadium in West Lafayette. Those be the Fresno State Bulldogs coming in at number 25 this week. So I'm going to put them in the driver's seat because they're ranked and they're undefeated right now. But following behind them, Liberty still undefeated. James Madison still undefeated. I brought up Air Force already. Tulane is 3-1. Keep your eye on them. They lost early. They still have the recognition from last year because we know the committee likes to use the past to predict the future. They beat USC in the Cotton Bowl last year, so Tulane is still in this race. And then Marshall went to 4-0 with a win over the aforementioned Virginia Tech Hokies. Now, Hokies are in trouble. Now, Brent Pry, I don't think he's going to get fired this year. We know he took over a mess, taking over from Justin Fuente. But Virginia Tech has lost in back-to-back weeks to Rutgers and to Marshall. And oh, by the way, in 2 weeks, they get Florida State coming off a bye in Doak Campbell Stadium. So, Virginia Tech may not win another game this year unless they beat Virginia. And I mean, Virginia came close Friday night against NC State, 24-21. I don't know. I'm still watching Tony Elliott. I don't know if he got another year. I brought that up last week. I don't know if he has another year just based off of the tragedy that went down last year in Charlottesville. So, but we'll see. Rutgers had to end somewhere, right? We knew it was going to end against the Wolverines 31-7. They got me to cover because the spread was 24.5. How about that? But Michigan, Nebraska this week. Huh? Is Michigan going to call their score? Hmm. It's interesting. I'm interested. So, I brought up a few games next week that I'm interested in. So we'll see what happens. Alabama's going to go get some cowbell. So we'll see. That was a good game last night. South Carolina 37, Mississippi State 30. But I'm real interested in the SEC East. If you got Georgia over here, which I do for the time being, these next couple of weeks are going to tell the tale. Missouri pulled it out against Memphis yesterday in St. Louis. So you got Missouri, South Carolina, just based off of the way that they played Georgia. You got Florida, you got Kentucky. And then if Tennessee beats one of these other teams, you got a mess for second place potentially. And then the SEC West, what do? Bama still doesn't look whole yet. That defense is a buzzsaw, but they just don't look whole yet. LSU, I brought up the secondary. What's A&M secondary going to look like when they play a good team? I'm not counting Auburn and Arkansas. A lot of people like Ole Miss. I don't. I'm not counting the cowbells. So it may, predictably so, come down to that early November matchup in Tuscaloosa between LSU and Alabama. In the Pac-12, like I told you, Oregon State got Utah coming in on Friday. Cam Rising better play or Utah's taking an L. Oregon State was my preseason pick to make the Pac-12 title game. I didn't pick them to win it, but I picked them to go. They need this game, if they're still going to keep that alive, because Washington and Michael Penix, woo, that boy's putting up numbers and he might just be the Heisman front runner right now. But hey, Clemson 0-2. We talked about the ACC. Big Ten looking like we expected. Maryland is 4-0. Maryland goes to Columbus this weekend. Remember last year, Maryland played Ohio State pretty tough. So this is the type of game, Maryland, where if you want to announce yourself, if you want people to take you seriously, you got to go finish what you started last year. So conference season is here. 2-5 is happy. I'm hoping that you are as well. So like, review, subscribe. Let's get it on in the comments. Peace.